when I think about how I want to feel in my house, the word that comes to mind first for me is cozy. So it's probably not a surprise that I am drawn to the concept of and like books about hygge. Now, if you haven't heard about hygge, I feel like it's waning in popularity, although it's obviously still very popular with me. But it was super popular in like the mid to late 20-teens, I think. And it is a Danish concept of like being cozy in your house. It's something that they do in the winters especially, but also just, I think, throughout their days. So I don't know a lot about it. Obviously, I'm not Danish, but I own and have been reading this really amazing book by a Danish researcher who studies happiness, and part of that is the concept of hygge. And so reading this book has made me make small changes in my house. Like I burn more candles. I am more upfront about like having blankets just everywhere. And I'm hoping to make more changes too. If at some point you see me recording and this desk is like out here and I'm in the corner, that's one of the suggestions from the book. I kind of wanted to do it because I've been reading the book and I kind of wanted to do it and switch it, but I needed to record a video today and I just didn't want to take the time. Glass tops like this can take a little bit of precision to do. So I guess we will see what happens with that. But as I've learned more and more about hygge, I've realized that it's not just a decorating style. It's not just an aesthetic. It is also a way of life. And part of that way of life means slowing down and savoring the small moments, which is something that if you've been with this channel for any length of time, you know that I am moving toward in my life. And I think that it's good for a lot of us to move toward that in our lives as well. And so in today's episode, we are going to be talking about some ways that you can intentionally slow down. Now, this is probably going to be a longer episode because we are going to get into like the practical how-tos, but I want to start with talking about the two types of ways that you can slow down. The first is you can slow down your pace of life, and the second is that you can slow yourself down. Those might seem like they're kind of the same thing. I think this is an important distinction to make because a lot of times we can do one, but we don't do the other. And so we keep feeling stressed and anxious. So in this first part of the video, we are going to talk about the different types of slowing down, what they mean, and then we will get into like the practicalities of how to slow down enough to enjoy your life more. Okay, let's start with the pace of life because I feel like that's the one that we are most familiar with and that you probably think about the most. Your pace of life is basically what's visible on your schedule or your calendar. It has to do with the speed at which things occur in your life or the changes take place. Now that can be either like a very crowded schedule that stays the same, or it can be a somewhat loose schedule, but where things are changing all the time. That can also make your pace of life feel a lot more hectic because you have to catch up to stay with the changes. And obviously life happens at its own speed. And so while the changes are happening that you don't have control over, you also know like how many things you have going on and how much time you have to adjust to changes that happen in your life. And I think this is worth noting. If you can look at your schedule or your calendar, you can really see where your current priorities are. I'm a huge fan of Ramit Sethi and his podcast on like money and relationships. And I love watching his Netflix show because he'll like sit down before he meets a person or a couple and he'll like look at their spending and their like accounts and stuff without having ever met them before. And there's a lot that he can tell about them and their priorities just based on their money. And I think that this is pretty common. Like most financial guru people will tell you that where you spend your money is where your priorities are. But I think that this is also true for our time and our schedules. What is on your calendar is where your priorities are. Actually, probably even more than your money. So like while you have, a certain amount of time that you need to use for work every day, you also have like the structure of your weekends and your evenings and your mornings and things like that outside of work. And how you choose to spend those really determines where your priorities are. You don't have control over everything that's happening in your life, especially if you are married and or have a family and kids. Like their schedules will also determine how you spend some of that extra time, free time. But on the whole, if you look at your calendar and your schedule, you can see where that time is going and what your priorities are. And this, may be a wake-up call for you. It may not be. I'm not saying this in like a sort of judgmental or positive way. It's a very neutral thing. It's just one of those things where if you're like, wow, am I really living in accordance with my values? Check your calendar. Check what you've actually been spending your time doing, because chances are that's going to tell you way more about how you are living out your values than just about anything else. And it will also tell you a lot about your pace of life. Those extra times that I talked about, your evenings, your weekends, your mornings, those times where you are not working, what do they look like? Are they crammed full of things that leave you stressed and anxious? Are they like kind of this perfect balance of time for others, time for yourself, time for responsibilities? Do you feel like there's maybe not enough of some of the things that you value? Like, take a look at it and think about if your pace of life is where you want it to be. And I should just stop here and let you know that if you are waiting for me to prescribe the perfect pace of life for you, that is not going to happen in this video. It's not going to happen ever. Obviously, I personally favor a little bit of a slower pace of life for myself, but the best pace of life for you is going to depend on who you are and your season of life. It varies from person to person, and there are times where you can have a slower pace of life. There are times when a faster one is more appropriate. The purpose of this video is basically, if you have gotten to the point where you think that your pace of life is just maybe a little too speedy or just way too fast, to give you the tools that you need to slow yourself and your pace of life down just a little bit. If you are constantly feeling stressed by your schedule, by the amount of things you have to do, by feeling like you are always running behind, this video can help you slow yourself and your life down. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I have all the answers and I know exactly how you should live your life, because I don't. Only you can figure that out. And so I'm going to give you the tools that I can here to help you figure that out. But after this video is over, you're going to have to do the thinking and the work yourself to make sure that you are living a life that you love. Before we get to those tips, let's talk about slowing yourself down. Slowing yourself down mainly refers to the process of like grounding yourself in the present, being at peace and calm, and not tripped up by worry and anxiety and or anger or all of those emotions that make us want to rush and hurry through our lives. Clearing your schedule is hard, but this is harder. If you've ever gone on vacation and not understood why you couldn't relax because you were away from everything and everyone, this is why. I feel like I've talked about this a lot on this channel, and I will talk about it a lot more. But our culture glorifies busyness and productivity and efficiency to the point that when we are not running full throttle towards something, we often feel like we are falling behind and that we're never going to be able to catch up. And so if you are feeling that way and you need to hear this today, I just want to let you know that it is okay. You are not behind. You can take some time for yourself, whether that's a couple of minutes, a couple hours, a couple of days. It's okay. The world is not going to fall apart. Your life is not going to fall apart. If you need to take some time away from that goal or that thing that you're chasing, it's okay. There's more to life than constantly grinding. And if you don't give yourself those moments to rest and really be present and slow yourself down mentally and emotionally and physically, you are going to get to that goal and it's going to feel empty. So make sure that you are giving yourself permission to slow yourself down. And if this video is like not enough motivation, which like I understand that me just telling you that it's okay is probably not going to help you feel okay, my suggestion is to listen to Vienna by Billy Joel like 20 times. That sometimes works for me. But just hearing over and over those reassuring words like, slow down, you crazy child. Where's the fire? What's the hurry about? You better cool it off before you burn it out. And just remembering that like the world is out there. It's waiting to be explored. And it's good and necessary to take the time to do that too. But in all seriousness, I know that me or Billy Joel or anybody telling you that you need to slow down is not necessarily going to help you figure out how to slow down. So let's get to those practical things right now. First of all, I will say that kind of for either of these problems, therapy really helps. It helps you get to the underlying issues behind why your schedule is packed, why you feel so stressed and anxious all the time. And so I would just say, like, first of all, therapy helps. And if you are not in therapy, I recommend it. If you are in therapy, this could be something to bring up with your therapist. I know that we don't always feel like our therapist can help in certain areas, but they're going to be able to help you unpack this and figure out where your priorities really are. And I am not a therapist, and this is not a therapy session, but what I can help you with is giving you some other tips that I've discovered along the way. And so let's get to those. Here are some things you can do to slow down your pace of life. The first is to say no. This can be really hard, but if something isn't helping you move toward your goals or isn't really in alignment with your values, it doesn't have to be against your values. It just isn't necessarily in line with your values or your priorities in your life at this time. You can and should say no. This can be hard for a lot of us if we're overachieving or we're perfectionists or we're people pleasers. All of those things can come in. And I feel like especially when you're female, we feel this pressure to just have to do everything all the time for everyone. But it's okay to say no. And if your schedule is too crowded, you should say no, because you're not going to be able to give yourself in the ways that you want to. You're not going to be the person that you want to be if you are always stretched too thin and you don't have time for anything. The second thing is you can take an honest look at your schedule and eliminate some things. This can be really hard. If you struggle with decluttering stuff around your house, you're going to know that decluttering your schedule can also be very stressful. And here's the thing. When you are doing it, you need to remember why you are doing the things that you're doing. And you also need to remember the kind of life that you want to lead. There are things you're just not going to have control over. You're not going to have control over the fact that you have to be at work 8 hours a day. I mean, maybe you kind of have control over what job you work, but chances are, unless you're like independently wealthy, you have to work some sort of job, right? So what you do with those remaining hours is even more precious. And again, like if you have to run kids to practices or do things, like there are some things that you may feel like you have a limited amount of control over, right? You can have a discussion with your kids about trimming down the number of activities that they do, or you can talk to your friends about carpooling or things like that if you want to free up a little bit of time in your schedule. But ultimately, like your kids have to do some things and you want to support them in that. So you need to be able to do those things that you know you're obligated to because they're family or whatever for other people. But chances are there are some things on your schedule that you're doing that you don't need to be doing, or you don't need to be doing as often or as consistently as you are. And so just take a look at your schedule, think about what your priorities are in this season of your life, and do your best to trim things down as much as possible. Have those hard conversations, say no to things that you need to say no to. And if you're struggling with this at all, it's really helpful to bring somebody else into this process. If you have a trusted friend or spouse, or just somebody who really cares about you and will hold space for all the things that you are thinking about. And it also helps if you use a tool like, I think I've talked about this before, but there's a tool called the Values Sort Card app, or just some sort of tool where you can sort through what your values and priorities are in this particular season of your life so that you can make schedule changes accordingly. I will also say that if there is something on your schedule currently that you find yourself dreading or constantly skipping because you just don't feel like it that day, it may be time to officially just cut that and say, you know what? Okay, this is not happening right now. I wish it was. I wish I was in a frame of mind where this worked for me. I'm not. So for right now, we are just going to say no to that. The third way to slow down your pace of life is to allow yourself more time between things. And so this is for those of us who like to pack our schedule very tightly. We like to, have one appointment after another, one meeting after another, one thing after another. We just go, 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 go. It's going to make a big difference if that's you, if you can allow yourself just a few minutes between things to rest, to recover, to prepare for the next thing. If you are constantly in back-to-back-to-back meetings all day, consider going to like a 15-minute meeting schedule. If you have an hour meeting, make sure that you leave 15 minutes in. Even if the meeting isn't over, give yourself that time to breathe, to decompress, to prepare for the next meeting, because you're going to need it. And you will notice a difference in how you feel just because you're slowing your pace of life down that little bit. You're not having to rush from one thing to the next. The fourth thing you can do to slow your pace of life down is to create a self-care routine and stick to a particular time to do it. Now, this is really hard, especially when you feel like your schedule is overstuffed. So I would recommend not doing this one without doing some of the other things we've already talked about. But here's the deal. If you say, okay, I'm going to do a simple self-care routine of a shower, some skincare, brushing my teeth in the evenings, starting at 10, and then I'm going to go to bed at 10:30, and you stick to that, that is going to help you cut a lot of things down in your life. You're going to have, first of all, like a nice wind down ritual. It can also be a nice wind up ritual for the day if you'd rather do it in the morning. But it's also going to give you a specific time that you have to be in. You have to be done with your things for the evening because you have to get home and spend that time for yourself. A lot of us don't actually have a consistent time for self-care. I'm guilty of that myself. And so if you create this sort of wind down ritual where you are taking care of yourself for 15, 30 minutes in a day, I think you'll be surprised at how luxurious that feels and how much it helps you just kind of slow your pace of life down, figure out your priorities, be in touch with yourself. Number 5, if your job is what is causing your pace of life to feel hectic because you have to work extra long hours all the time, without pay or whatever, see if you can have a conversation with people at your work about your schedule. Your boss may be able to help you offload some things. They may not be fully aware of your workload, but it's definitely worth thinking through and having some conversations with people or training people to take some tasks off your plate if you can. I know that this is not always possible depending on your workplace and the environment and the culture. There are some professions where you're just expected to grind it out. And if that's the case, that is very tough. If you need extra support, it's okay to have calmly, professionally, those conversations asking for it. And if the answer is no, then you know. And maybe it's time to start looking for another job if that is just not working out for you. Number 6, a second thing that can really speed your pace of life up is if you are the primary caregiver for children or parents or whatever, or the primary doer of tasks in your household. This really doesn't matter too much about your stage of life, right? Like you may be somebody who's taking care of their parents. You may be taking care of your own children. You may be married. You may not be married. You may not have any kids or parents or anything. You're just taking care of the house. If you have a roommate, if you have a spouse, if you have a partner, have a conversation with that person about what you need. And I know that for a lot of us, especially as women, we feel like we have to take care of everything. We have to do it all. Things have to be done our way. And so it is hard sometimes to give up that feeling of being able to do it all, even if it is stressing us out. We want to take care of people, and we're kind of expected to a lot of times, but you don't need to work that second shift. And in fact, if you can ask for help from someone in your house, you should. We need to be good team players. I'm not saying like, oh, just pawn everything else off on your spouse or your partner or your roommate. But we don't have to be the team ourselves. So if that is part of what's contributing to it, have a conversation about how you're feeling. Share your feelings without judgment and see what that other person can do to help. I think that it may be helpful, depending on your situation, to have a few conversations, develop a plan together of how you're going to split the tasks more evenly, or maybe how you're going to offset for each other in busy seasons, and just really make sure that you are working together as a team. And as I'm saying this, I'm like, this is kind of, marriage or partnership or being a good friend or roommate 101. But for a lot of us, we take on so much and we sacrifice ourselves and our schedules. And as a result, our pace of life just speeds up. We feel like we never have time for anything. We're always trying to go, 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 go. Where there's somebody in our life who could help us slow down a little bit, breathe, and really give ourselves that space that we need to not feel so stressed and anxious all the time. And a lot of times those people want to do it. We just have to be willing to ask for help and put our own opinions about how all of this should work and our feelings about maybe not doing enough or being proud of what we are able to do aside, and just say hey, actually, I do need help and I want you to help me. And then the final thing that we can do to really slow our pace of life down is to accept that not everything has to be done perfectly and some things don't have to be done at all. This really comes back to knowing what the priority is in your life, knowing what's important for you. But for a lot of us, we are trying to do a lot of things. We are trying to balance a lot of plates in the air. And I feel like this is a somewhat overused metaphor, but it does work. If you're juggling a lot of balls, you need to know which ones are plastic and which ones are glass, right? You don't want to do something that's going to get you fired. You don't want to do something that's going to alienate you from your spouse. But there are a lot of things that we put pressure on ourselves to do that don't need to be done to the standard that we are holding ourselves to. And some of them don't need to be done at all or don't need to be done as often. And so think about those things. Maybe it is how often you clean your house. If you don't have guests over as much and the house doesn't get super filthy throughout the week, maybe you don't need to be cleaning it every week. Maybe you could give yourself some grace and take a week off every once in a while. Just think about the things that you put pressure on yourself to do and think about how those line up with your values and priorities, and see if there are some things you could maybe give yourself some grace on or just skip either altogether or once in a while. Okay, so now that we have talked about how to slow your pace of life, let's talk about how to slow yourself down. And I will say that these things do play off each other a little bit. If you're trying to slow yourself down and simultaneously trying to slow your pace of life, you're going to see more results than if you just work on one or the other, which is why I think it's important to understand these differences. I think there's a lot of things that focus on one or the other, and I think that's great, but we really need to make sure that we are doing both. Now, you'll notice a theme going through all of these tips about slowing yourself down, and that's basically that they're a form of practicing patience. This was something that I first became aware of in Oliver Burkeman's amazing book, 4,000 Weeks, and in it, he talks about how patience used to be considered a virtue and now it's really not. And I do feel like he's right. I feel like with the loss of seeing patience as a good thing, and with the glorification of being busy and being impatient, we've sort of lost that ability to slow ourselves down and feel like that is good. So if that helps you, take it. If it doesn't, that's fine. Let's just go through the next few tips. Number one, drive the speed limit. This is an exercise that I got from a book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. It's a really good book. I highly recommend it, especially if you're a Christian like me. It sort of approaches this from a religious, but also just really helpful perspective. So I recommend it to anybody. But this is just a really good way of practicing not being in a hurry. I think so often we are tempted to speed because we view that as wasted time. We view whatever we're doing as important. We're just always in a rush and we're always hurrying. We're late from something that came before and we want to try to make it there on time or as fast as possible. There's just so many things about rushing that tempt us to speed. And so if we go into it saying, you know what, this is going to take the time that it takes and I am not going to go over the speed limit, that's really a way to consciously slow yourself down. It can be a little irritating, I'm going to just warn you. A lot of these exercises can, but I think this one probably takes the cake. But just try driving the speed limit, see how it goes. Second of all, spend time in nature, unhurried time, no phone, no real agenda, just get out in the woods for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, go to a park, go to the beach, whatever you need to do, just spend time in nature. And this, for me, is a very centering thing. I remember going to Yellowstone National Park with my husband on a vacation, and that was in the middle of a very stressful season in my life. And I remember looking up at the mountains and looking at the animals and just the amazing geysers and hot springs and pools and terraces and like everything that is there, and just being amazed and feeling like the things that I had left behind me were so small in comparison to the beauties and the wonder of nature. Personally, I feel closer to God in nature. If you are not a person of faith, you may not experience that, but I do think that there's still something for a lot of us where when we get out in nature, there's something very centering about it for us. It helps us just kind of slow down, breathe deeper, bask in the sunshine, savor our lives. So that's the second tip. Third tip, spend time absorbed in something. Now, this is sort of related to the nature one, but this can be anything. This can be, doing something you enjoy as far as like a hobby. This could be something like cooking or reading a book, like anything that takes your full concentration. I don't really recommend, if there's something that you normally do to relax or unwind in the evening and it's just not cutting it for you, like, if you're playing video games or watching a movie or something, if that for some reason is not absorbing you and taking your full attention because you are so used to it, because we do get used to the things that we do very often, try switching it up. Either try doing something you haven't done before. So like, for example, if you always play a certain kind of game, try playing a different kind of game that forces you to like learn and engage a little bit more, or just completely don't do those things for one evening and try doing something else. See how it goes. Number 4, quit multitasking. This is something that is going to help you slow down throughout your day. So for example, if you're the kind of person who usually works during lunch, make it a priority, even if you can only take like 10 or 15 minutes for your lunch to eat it without doing anything else. Just eat it. If you happen to find yourself in a conversation with a coworker, that's fine, but like, don't be doing work. And also, like if you're in a meeting, you can be taking notes about the meeting, but don't be like answering your emails or planning your day or ordering groceries on your phone. Like try to, as much as you can, quit multitasking. This is a way to just sort of slow yourself down, and it can be very scary. I don't feel like this one is so much aggravating for me when I've tried it as much as like scary, because I feel like I'm not going to be able to get everything done. And really that's part of what you have to learn when you are slowing yourself down, is that it's okay if not everything gets done. Chances are you weren't getting everything done before, but it's just like learning to trust the process, learning to trust yourself, learning to trust that you will get the things done that need to be done, and that you have enough time to do the things that truly need to get done. And if you find that that's not the case, then that probably means that you need to have some conversations with people, like we talked about in this last section, about your pace of life, your workload, your home responsibilities, your whatever else is going on. You need to do what you can to figure that out so that everything can get done. So it's not really your responsibility to multitask in order to get everything done. It's your responsibility to stay present in the moment and slow yourself down so that you don't careen toward burnout and just exhaustion. Number 5, start journaling. And this can look a lot of different ways. And I'm actually really excited because I'm going to be doing a journaling series sometime later this year on this channel. Right now, I'm trying a bunch of different journaling methods sort of behind the scenes. And I want to give myself some time to test them out, to really see what works for me and what doesn't. But just know that like journaling doesn't have to be writing for 15 minutes every day. It can be something as simple as a sentence a day. It doesn't have to be something that takes a lot of time. But I do feel like keeping some sort of record of your life really helps with reflection. And so like having that outlet to reflect on your own life and just kind of sort of center yourself on your priorities and what you're doing is super helpful. And it does help you just take a step back from the constant rush and whirl of things and go, okay, what am I doing? Let me appreciate my life. Let me course correct where I need to. And it's really helpful for slowing down just enough Number 6 is sort of the culmination of a lot of what we've been talking about in this video, and it is work on being grounded in the present moment and being at peace. Like, this is going to be the most difficult one because it's going to mean that you have to do the hard work, the deep work, probably with a therapist or someone like that, of letting go of the need to shape your reality in a way that fits and makes you comfortable. You're going to have to do the work to learn that it's okay to just exist in the present moment. This is a journey that I'm personally on. I honestly think that my need for control fuels a lot of my anxiety. And I didn't discover that until I started working with a therapist, and she was able to point some things out to me. And the bit that I've been able to live more in the present and live less in the future and the past has been the bit that I have been able to slow myself down enough to really appreciate and enjoy my life. And then number 7, do a tedious task that you've been putting off because it's boring and you don't like how long it takes, and really observe your thoughts and feelings while you're doing it, and then process that with somebody you trust or in your journal. Okay, and that's it. I know this has been a long episode, so if you have watched for this long, I would love to hear the part that was most helpful to you, or the part that you're going to be trying this week in your own life. Please let me know in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.